Gecko running on a Samsung Galaxy S2. This is normally an Android phone, but there's no Android on this one. Effectively what we have here is our web rendering engine, the same one that powers Firefox, running more or less directly on the hardware. So that whole layer in between the web and the hardware that is filled by Android or whatever mobile OS you usually would be using is just missing. Everything you see here is written in HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, all open web technologies. This launcher, for example, you can see that we can view source here, and it's just built out of the things that you use to make a website. We didn't want to create a completely new platform for mobile, but we wanted to take a platform that we use already, the web, and fill in a few gaps to make it do everything that we would need to have it run a phone. So an example of that is in the dialer here, right? This is a dialer, not too surprising on a phone, but it's built as a web app using HTML5 and CSS and JavaScript. But this is a web app that can use the radio on this device to make a phone call, which is new, right? The web didn't used to be able to do that.
Well, yeah.
And so what we're doing is the same way that on Android or iOS, the system exposes APIs so that native apps can take advantage of things like the dialer, contacts, SMS, things like that. We're exposing all of those things through JavaScript APIs so that web apps can take advantage of all those things.
Yes.
So another example I mentioned is SMS, right? We can send an SMS through what is basically a web page. Contacts as well. There are a number of these things that have already existed but also work really well in this context, like using the camera, right? Web developers have already been able to use those things through JavaScript, but obviously they're very useful here as well. Other things I can show you are like video running here. This isn't even hardware accelerated yet, but just using open web technologies like WebGL, we can have video running in a video app that looks, much like what you'd expect to see on Android or iOS at a pretty good frame rate. But this whole thing is a web app, right, written in HTML and JavaScript. Yeah. Similarly, games, right? We can play Cut the Rope here, which is a pretty popular mobile game. Just wait for it to come up here. So again, I can just go into this and start playing, and this is again all written using open web technologies, running on this HTML5 OS essentially, and have an experience that is really very similar to what I would expect to see on something like Android or iOS. In fact, what we've found, this surprised me, but that because we are a much flatter stack, right, it's just the hardware and then a web rendering engine and then the web on top of that, we've sort of done away with a lot of overhead that you find on a heavier system like one that has an OS like Android or something else. So in fact, it actually runs really fast. There's a lot of optimization we have yet to do here, but already it's really performant, and in fact works really well on lower end devices as well. So you can bring a smartphone experience using the web on a much lower end hardware.
Okay, so you can basically, it's not dependent on having like a dual core processors and stuff
right.
like that.
This is a very high end device, but I know that some of our partners are interested because they can take a modern operating system based on the web to a much lower end, like feature phone grade device, and which opens up, of course, a lot of new markets.
Okay, so this is completely open source technology. So, would you, because Android, they have the whole sort of like hacking and ROMing community, modders, would they be able to like sideload this as well onto like an Android kernel alongside it? Or?
So I know that some of our developers can dual boot into this and into Android, but certainly the guys who've been working on this, building it to run on Android hardware. But again, there's no Android on this phone right now. It's it's running B2G instead.
Yeah. Okay, and it's basically Java based, is that correct? Like the
the suite of modern web languages, technologies, HTML5 often gets used as sort of a shorthand for all of it, but it's HTML, the new versions of JavaScript, and CSS. So that set of technology that really anyone who knows how to make a website, these are the languages and tools they're already using. But this entire launcher and all the apps are built using those, and so future HTML5 apps that people would install here through the market or use on from the web. It's all just using open web technologies.
Okay, so how is this going to be? How would people is it OEMs that put it on the phone, or do you deal partnerships with, say, Samsung or somebody? Or?
Our goal here, so this is an example UI. The one that Telefonica showed earlier in the week was their own experience, their own UI design, and that's the point. We're building a platform that people, carriers, OEMs, others can take and customize to do with what they want. We just want to provide a platform that is open and that is flexible, that people can do what they want with it.
So what if it's completely sort of web standard and HTML5. What if you have no internet? Does it not work?
So that's an interesting point. So when we talk about web apps, what we mean are apps built using that set of technologies, right? They're these open web technologies, but there's nothing in that implies they have to be on a server somewhere. They can be locally installed on your phone.
Because it's not like a Google Chromebook where you're not connected to the web, you can't do anything.
I mean, the line is blurring. There are very few apps I can think of that have no component for which you need an internet connection, right? A lot of the content comes from the web, but yeah, certainly these can be locally installed. You can use them while offline, but of course everything gets more interesting once it's connected to the internet.
Yeah. Okay. And is there any talking to any manufacturers at the moment about releasing in the UK, like any products or anything?
So the ones that have been announced so far is that Telefonica is interested in using this to. I think they're planning to put out a device this year based on B2G. Deutsche Telekom is working on is contributing to the project, but those are the only ones that I certainly know about that we're working with at the moment. But certainly we'd love to work with more.
Yeah, and then this will be something that would be like, say, a developer could take like a phone, route it, and then put this onto it himself, or
it's all the source code is available on GitHub. I think you can take it and do whatever you want with it. It's completely open. It's still a little bit complicated, but I think we're going to be working on that too.
Is there any sort of future plans to sort of monetize the platform? I know Google says that Android is completely open source, but there is like tie-ins and things like that.
My understanding is that we're giving it away.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's nice. That's very good of you.
Yeah.
Cool. And yeah, it looks really good.
Great.
Cool. Thank you very much for that.
My pleasure.